Hey guys, we're back. This time we're taking a look at the Diamondback faction for GKR's heavy hitters. And this one's got some interesting combo weapons that can really pull off some nasty effects in the right situations. And probably my second favorite out of the ones I've played so far. So we'll get right in and take a look. So first thing we're going to look at here is our sentry guns. We have a 987 on our sentry gun speed, which makes us the second fastest sentry gun in the game, only behind Thunder Happy, which is kind of nice. So we're going to be shooting second as far as those go. The trade-off here is when we get to our support units. First one we have here is our repair unit Snake Oil, and pulling it at a massive 237, which makes us the slowest repair unit in the game. So we're going to be repairing last after everybody else, so keep that in mind. The next one we have here is our combat unit, and our combat unit's got a 537, which puts us at the second fastest combat unit, falling just short of Hammer Strike. So that's nice to be in there, get our shots in with him. And finally we have our recon unit, and once again we are the slowest of the recon units at a 737, which is a high number but still not high enough compared to the other recon units out there. So got to keep those slow guys in mind when building up your systems and planning out your attacks for your turns. For our primary weapon options, we have a nice selection here: 2 ballistic, 1 energy, 1 missile. Our first one here is the Double Fanger. It comes in at 2 energy, range 2 to 4 for 5 damage. It deals critical hits on a double 4, double 5, or double 6 instead of just a double 6. So that's a really cool option in there. And crit damage on a 5 damage weapon is pretty mean. Criticals in this game make it so your opponent does not get to roll defense. So that can be a really hard hit if you manage to roll those doubles in there. So that's a pretty mean setup right there. Got to watch out for that minimum range of 2, so you can't shoot it point blank though. But for 2 energy, that's a pretty nice primary. Does have only a very mediocre speed though, which is something to keep in mind. Next we have Shed Your Skin, another mediocre speed on there. This one costs 3 energy. Got that range 3 to 5 because it is a missile type weapon. Means we could use indirect fire though. And got to watch out for those range 1 and 2. 6 damage though is great. And on a successful hit, you can discard a sponsor card to draw a new one. That's going to be really helpful if you have a sponsor card that right now isn't helping you or has an ability you just don't really need. Gives you that option to swap those out. And the only trade-off is you have to discard before you draw, so you have to keep in mind that you may give up something and get something worse. There's a lot of cool cards in that sponsor deck, though, so that's pretty cool. 6 damage primary weapon you really can't go wrong with, especially one that has the option for that indirect fire, and that range 5 is nice. Next up we have the Rattler, another mid-speed weapon. 2 energy to fire, range 1 to 4 is not too bad. 5 damage is not too bad at all for a primary. And it attacks all opponents down a straight line firing away from you, and you lose 2 damage for each subsequent target down the line. The really cool thing about this, though, is that you can hit those multiple targets in a range up to 4. So if they manage to be in a line, or even you get 2 guys who are in close combat fighting off in the distance there, you can fire into them. You do 5 to the first target you hit, and 3 to the next one, and so on down the line. Can be a very powerful card when played in the right circumstances. Next up we have Coiled Strike, and this is probably my favorite out of the primaries for Diamondback here. 637's a faster than the others, but still mediocre speed as far as that goes. 3 energy is a bit steep, the range is a bit short, and the 5 damage is average for a primary weapon. It's on the higher of average scale. The big thing to this one is if you can deal 3 or more damage, you can immediately play another Coiled Strike card from your hand at no cost. So you don't have to pay that energy again. So you fire one of these while you're holding one in your hand. If you deal at least 3 damage, you can play another one. And you roll the attack again. And if you do enough 3 damage or more, you can play another one. And you can play all of these in a single turn if you manage to pile them up in your hand and just get in one massive devastating blow. Of the primary weapons that Diamondback has to offer, Coiled Strike seems like the no-brainer to me. The other ones have their uses in certain situations, but my go-to is always going to be the Coiled Strike. For our secondary weapons, the Diamondback leans heavily towards energy with only one missile in there, no ballistics. So keep that in mind if you're playing against them. Ballistic weapons are not their go-to. The first one we have here is a super slow weapon called the Venom Spray. And 1 energy to fire, which is great. 2 to 3 range is okay. That 2 damage is alright. It also attacks multiple units within range, rolling to attack each target. So you can pretty much hit everything in your fire arc at that range 2 to 3. And for 1 energy, you can't go wrong with that as your option. Just keep in mind the 2 damage is kind of mediocre. It's on the low side for secondaries, but still a nice option there. Next we have this Snail's Pace Tail Whip with a massive 37, making it the second slowest weapon in the game, I believe. Rivaled only by one of King Wolf's missile options, I believe. And definitely going to be going last with this thing. 1 energy, range 1 to 2, 3 damage. And if it misses, it automatically hits an enemy unit adjacent to your heavy hitter with 1 damage. That one's kind of cool as a secondary option on there, but overall, not a huge fan of that as a weapon choice. Next we have the Forked Tongue. Again, another super slow weapon. 1 energy, range 1 to 3 is pretty nice. 2 damage is pretty standard for a secondary weapon. And on a successful attack, it automatically hits an enemy unit adjacent to the primary damage or target with 1 more damage. So that's kind of a cool little ability on there to give you that second target. It's a slow weapon, you're going to be shooting last, but if you can find guys grouped up, you get that extra hit in there. Next we have the Viper missiles. Of all the missiles, this is probably one of the fastest out there, so keep that in mind. Missiles are, of course, indirect fire weapons as well, which is nice. 1 energy, range 3 to 4, so you got to watch that 1 and 2 blind spot on there. 3 damage is very nice for a secondary weapon. And you can spend an additional energy, so make this cost 2, and it'll hit without actually having to roll the dice. You have to decide if you're going to do that before you roll the dice, though. And doing so makes it so you can't roll a critical, so you have to keep that in mind because you're just automatically hitting, so you're not ever getting that chance to roll a critical double sixes. Still a very nice option, and one of the better secondary weapons in here, I think. Next we have Bloodsucker, pretty average weapon speed on the lower end as most of Diamondback's weapons are. 2 energy, range 1 to 3. 3 damage is nice to see on a secondary. And that if you deal 2 or more damage, you place the top faction card from your damage pile face up into your discard pile. Basically repairs you by 1, which is really nice. I love this weapon. The trick is here you got to get a 2+ damage on a 3 weapon. So, meaning your target can't save more than 1. If they block more than 1 of the damage you're inflicting, you don't get that ability, but definitely nice to have there. Of the secondary weapon options here, I'm thinking Venom Spray and Bloodsucker are going to be my go-to, and possibly Viper Missile as a third, Forked Tongue and Tail Whips towards the end. Definitely like the combo of Venom Spray and Bloodsucker. Combined with Coiled Strike, I think is a pretty mean loadout. Then we get down to our orbital weapons. Orbital Shock here is a card that came with the Kickstarter, so you might not have that depending on when you pick up the game, but you should have Orbital Strikes. And the trade-off for most of our primary and secondary weapons on the heavy hitter being so slow is that we have the fastest Orbital Strikes in the game, both Orbital Strike and Orbital Shock, so they are nice to have in there. You can include any or all or none of these in your deck if you want. And in doing so, keep in mind that when you fire these, though, they do go to the damage pile after use. So they're 1 shot, and then it actually hurts you by 1 for using so. You can use the repair drone as well as your Bloodsucker weapon to repair these, so you can get them back. Keep that in mind. Definitely with the extra option to repair in the options for Diamondback, I'm more inclined to take more of these, if not all of them, because I know I can have those chances to get them back. They're also pretty fast firing, and they're pretty beastly weapons to start with. It's at 2 energy to fire, unlimited range, doesn't require line of sight or anything, and 4 damage on the orbital strikes. And then the 3 energy, 5 damage on that orbital shock. Again, it's a one-use weapon, but both are very nice, and like I said, more inclined to take these as options in this build because of Diamondback's ability to heal. Next, as with all heavy hitters, we have our deploy cards. You can put up to 5 of these into your deck. I might go a little bit lower on these just so I can bring that extra orbital strike. Deploying your units only cost you 2 energy instead of 4 if you have one of these cards to do so, which allows you to do other things with your energy on the turn since you only have 5 to work with. Again, I don't mind pushing this mech and maybe taking a click of damage here or there to do extra things, because I know I can repair them later, so I'm less inclined to need all 5 of these, although they are nice to have if you can squeeze them in. Next we have our maneuver cards. Both of these are good depending on the weapon options you pick in here. Jump jets I'm pretty much going to recommend on every heavy hitter. The ability to move, especially if you have any type of weapons with a minimum range, it's going to give you that chance to move back and possibly get things into or out of range depending on what you're doing. Quick rotation comes into play with things like the chain gun, where you can fire it into all enemies within a certain range. Basically let you rotate your fire arc around, so depending on where you finalized your position, you might not have a shot on what you're looking for, and this will allow you to change your facing and get as many targets in that fire arc as possible. So both of these are good options. Again, depends on your playstyle a little bit, but I recommend both. Next we have our reaction cards. As with any of the heavy hitters, I always recommend taking the fake shots. They let you reroll your attack roll, let you get out of a critical fumble if you happen to do it, or just make that shot you really need to hit if it misses. It does cost you an energy, but maybe well worth it in certain situations if you need those rolls to hit. Flank defense is a hit or miss, depends on your playing style. If you're good at maneuvering and you can keep the enemy from getting behind you and getting into your flanks, you may not need these. I'm probably, if I'm going to cut something out of this heavy hitter, it's probably going to be these to make room for other things. And then finally we have our reaction defense cards. You have defense from missiles, from ballistic, and from energy. What you choose of these really depends on the opponent that you're going after. If you're going to be fighting against King Wolf, King Wolf doesn't have very many missile options, so taking missile defense cards aren't really going to be your best option. Whereas if you're going against Hammer Strike, a lot of their weapons are missile based, so taking the anti-missile systems is a better option. So it really depends on what your opponent's going to be bringing, and if you know their playstyle, what they might use. Like, I tend to favor energy weapons, so taking energy defense against me is probably a good idea. So these you kind of pick and choose depending on your playstyle versus what you know of your opponent. For our pilots, everybody has options of the same 8 pilots to choose from, so who you're going to choose is really based on your playstyle. All of them have useful abilities in various situations. Rerolling 1s on your armor saves, extra range and things. The deploying costing less energy is nice. Moving costing less energy is nice. So all of them have their uses. Really, there is no best option. You're going to pick what fits your playstyle versus what you plan to accomplish. There are some that can complement weapons that you're using, like the 2 that allow you to spend less energy for deploying and for movement. Those are going to help you if you're using weapons with a higher energy cost, so you have a little bit more energy to work with each turn, and so on. But that's all a personal preference, and everybody has the same options regardless of faction for those. And that's a quick look at Diamondback. I definitely like the comboing of the coiled strike. Having a lot of our weapons are slow on this guy, so we're going to be shooting last, so you really got to plan your placement and things and hope you don't take too much damage before you get to fire. That's something you always need to keep in mind. But you got the repair drone in there, you've got the bloodsucker weapon that allows you to heal. Keep those in mind, use those to the best of your ability. save them till you've taken some damage. Those Bloodsucker cards, you really want to play them because they're cool, but at the same time, if you don't have any damage, they're a waste. So you want to hang on to those for a couple turns and not necessarily use them as soon as you get them so that you have them. Same thing goes with the Coiled Strike. As cool as that is as a weapon, you may want to wait until you have 2 or 3 saved up in your hand just in case you get that ability to chain them back to back and do a massive devastating attack. As I said, I really like the way things combo together on this. I'm still a big fan of King Wolf. That Dire Laser is my go-to weapon, but you can't go wrong with Coiled Strike, the Bloodsucker setup on this to heal yourself and get those big chain attacks going. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for our look at Diamondback from GKR Heavy Hitters. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.